And welcome to the University of Nottingham PGCEi webinar. My name is Helen Spiropoulos and I'm the Admissions Manager at Stafford Global. And joining me this evening all the way from the University of Nottingham is Dr. Rupert Knight. Good evening to you, Dr. Rupert. Okay, so we can see Roger.
Okay, good evening. I hope you can all hear me okay.
Yes, we can, Dr. Rupert. There was just a slight audio lag there, but we can now hear you. Okay, so what we're going to do this evening is I'm just quickly going to chat to you about Stafford Global and what our function is in the Middle East. I'm then going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, who's going to take you through the program. And he's got a wonderful slide presentation that he'll talk you through. Towards the end of the presentation, I will open up the panel so that you can actually ask any questions that you'd like to ask me or Dr. Rupert, and we'll try and answer these as quickly as possible. What I am going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at these questions quite carefully so that I can actually group them together. The reason is a lot of these questions are very similar, if not identical. So do listen out for that important question and answer. So I'm now going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert. Just briefly, let me just also chat about Stafford before I do that. Well, Stafford is a resource center for distance learning education in the Middle East, and we were established in 1993, and we are currently the resource center for 5 UK universities, one of which is the University of Nottingham. Now, we do offer a variety of programs ranging from certificates to diplomas, bachelor's, MBA, MSc, right through until doctorates. So we really do have all the programs that would suit your personal as well as your professional needs. Now, our function here at Stafford is to assist you throughout the application process. And we do also offer academic as well as some administrative support. So the mere fact that you all are here this evening means that you have obviously been in touch with one of our experienced academic consultants. Okay, so I'm now going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, who's going to take you through the program, and I'll join you again towards the end of the presentation. Over to you, Dr. Rupert.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen, for that introduction. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about the university briefly, and then get into talking about the PGCEi course in detail. Try and give you an idea of how the course works, what it's trying to do, what it's not trying to do, the way it's assessed, and all of those things that you're probably interested in finding out about. We'll also talk about what makes a good application. And then at the end, as Helen was saying, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and we'll clear up hopefully any other points that you're less certain about. So first of all, the University of Nottingham itself is a really highly ranked university internationally, very well-known university, always in very top levels of the comparative rankings around the world. And it's got a very global feel to it. So as well as the international students that we have who come to the UK, we also have campuses in China and in Malaysia. So it's truly an international university with a big international focus. And it's a university that has a very strong reputation and very high rankings currently in terms of its research profile, but also its teaching profile. So that's the broader context, but then the School of Education within the university, which is where we're based, has been going for well over 100 years in one form or another. And education is a particular strength of the university. So we have, at the moment in the UK rankings, we're ranked 3rd for research. We're 8th as a subject in the UK rankings for education as a whole. So this is a department that's really well known within a prestigious university. It means that the researchers and the other staff who work with us are people who are at the cutting edge of this field. So we've got a lot of expertise in education, a lot of history, a lot of different courses covering all kinds of different things. And that means that a course like the one we're going to be talking about this evening can be really well informed by the latest thinking and is put together by and delivered by some people who have real expertise in this field. So within the world of education, this is, if you like, a brand that is really well recognized and well respected. So let's think about the PGCEi specifically. So this is the Postgraduate Certificate in Education, and the I stands for International. This is a course that we run all over the world. It's been going for some 12 years or so, and has grown from very small beginnings to a course now which is really huge around the world. Thousands of people have come through that course. We run this in different hubs around the world, in different regions, and in the Middle East region, which we base in the UAE and through which we work with Stafford. We've probably had, I was trying to think today, we must have had well over 1,000 students over the years have come through just that region alone. So you're part of a big family around the world if you come onto this course. So thinking about what the course is and what it's trying to achieve, as it says here, this is a master's level course. So it's a course that is not about giving you a qualification to teach directly. It's not giving you what we'd call in the UK qualified teacher status, or in more general terms, a license to teach. So those things are always dependent on different countries around the world and will vary according to different legislation in different countries or even different parts of different countries. So this is not what this course is offering. This course is offering something alongside that, which is an academic program of study. So this is, as I said, master's level study, but it will benefit your practice. So whatever type of educator you are, whatever role you're working in, whatever age phase you're working in, you will find there are things in the course that are going to get you thinking about what you do day to day and cause you to question in the best possible way how you do things and why you do things. And I often at this point, I'll just give you my own example of when I was some years back. I was a teacher in school myself, and I studied at master's level in my spare time, much as you may be doing. And I found immediate benefits for my practice. It really caused a step change in what I did. It caused me to think differently. We can all get sucked into a little sort of insular bubble if we're not careful, where we do things one way and we understand one form of education. And it really got me out of that and broadened my horizons. So this is the kind of course that will do that. This is the kind of course that will give you a broader perspective on education. It will give you some of the theoretical principles that underpin what educators do, and it will get you really thinking about what education is all about. So we call this a blended learning program. And as you can see from the second bullet point here, usually what we mean by that is, as well as the online material that you study during the year in your own way and managing your own time and that you work through, we normally would have 2 lots of face-to-face meetings with you. So normally the tutor team, myself and colleagues, would fly out to the UAE, and we would be with you at the beginning of the course and about halfway through for face-to-face teaching, which is a compulsory part of the course. So although that's still the default way that we intend to run the course, right now, as you'll no doubt anticipate, things are very different. And things are different in all sorts of respects in life right now, and education is no exception. So right now, the kind of large-scale meetings that we would have for our teaching events are clearly not possible. And looking ahead to the next cohort that's starting for the course, which starts in October the 1st, the universities had to make a decision so that you as potential candidates know exactly what's possible, what's not possible, and what to expect. So the decision made is that temporarily we have to suspend the face-to-face tuition, which isn't possible at the moment. What we're going to do for the next cohort starting instead is we're going to replicate what we would do in that face-to-face workshop at the beginning and during the course further on. with an online experience. And what we mean by that is that we'll have at the beginning of the course, 1 week into the course, exactly the weekend that we would have had our face-to-face workshop, we're going to have an initial 2-day event online. And that will involve some materials that you can work through at your own pace, but also some what we would call synchronous experiences. So in other words, working live in interaction with tutors and interaction with other students. So that might involve, for example, some live presentations that we might do. It might involve question and answer sessions, small group seminars, and a chance to talk to us and to each other. So we'll have a 2-day experience kind of timetabled towards the beginning of the course. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, for each of the 3 modules, which we'll talk about in a moment, we'll have another event which is scheduled on a particular day at a point when you're just getting ready to submit your work for those modules, where we'll again have a range of activities on a particular day that you can partly work through but partly interact with live. And it'll be a chance to talk to tutors, be a chance for us to input to you and to deal with questions and offer tutorial support. So for this next cohort, that's what we're going to mean by a blended learning approach. So it's a blend of your own work at your own pace through the course, through the year, working on the module material, but also that blend of working with other students and with us live at those certain designated times. And this is a course, as I said, that will get you thinking about theory, thinking about principles of education. And it's a course that is, it's something you can personalize. So sometimes people ask us, is this a qualification that's suitable for me as a secondary maths teacher, or as a kindergarten teacher, or as a teaching assistant, all kinds of different roles. And the answer is that this is a generic program of study, but one that you tailor towards your own interest and your own setting. So we'll talk about the modules and how this works in just a minute. But the other thing to mention at this stage is that the I that we said in the title stands for international, means that the materials you work through are all about education, but specifically within international contexts. And every few years, more or less every 5 years or so, the course is updated, and you'd be very fortunate at the moment of beginning the course right near the beginning of a new cycle of materials. So this current academic year, we just updated the course. So our current cohorts are working on a brand new version of the course. And so the materials have just been updated. All of the things you're going to use, all of the examples, all of the readings are really current and have been revamped and developed and improved. So we're at the beginning of a new updated cycle. So let's have a look a little bit more about the structure of this course. So the PGCEi is made up of 3 modules. So you're going to get 60 credits at master's level, and we'll talk about how that might be transferred to other courses in a few minutes. Each of those is, each of the 3 modules is compulsory, 20 credits each, equally weighted. But within those compulsory modules, that tailoring and that personalization I mentioned comes through because you're able to select different units of study that are most relevant to you. And particularly in the second module, there's a huge range of different things that you can study and choose things that are most relevant to you. And also the assignments that you write, which I'll talk about in a moment, are all assignments that you will tailor to your own particular educational context. So for each of the modules, if you were a secondary maths teacher, for example, you could be writing about whatever the assignment brief is in that context. If you're a teaching assistant working with 5-year-old students, for example, then you can write about things and study things in that context. So everything you do is personalized and tailored to wherever you happen to be working. So these 3 modules are designed to take you on a kind of journey. So the first module is about educational aims and values, and that's all about what is education for. Sometimes we don't stop and think about that enough. So if you think, actually, well, education could be seen as being about attainment. It could be about getting grades, getting qualifications, and finding our place in the working world. But actually, you could also, or alternatively, see education as a force for good in the world in a wider sense. Maybe education is about creating global citizens who want to make the world a better place and change the world in some way. Or maybe education is about developing a whole person. It's not about doing something to somebody, filling them up with knowledge. It's perhaps about developing an individual's interests and potential in a very individual way. So those are just three different perspectives of many possible perspectives on what education might be for and about. So module 1 is all about exploring what education is for, but also exploring international education and what we mean by that. What makes a school an international school, for example? There are many different definitions. So we get you to reflect on a particular model of schooling and what the aims might be. In module 2 then, having discovered and thought about what education is trying to achieve, we then think about how that might be enacted. So module 2 is about learning. So it's about different theories of learning, a whole range of different perspectives on that, some of which will feel very familiar to you from your own background and your own working context. Others may be completely new. And also about teaching. So different teaching approaches, different teaching strategies, things like behavior, things like differentiation, the use of group work, things that educators think about on a daily basis. So we bring together learning and teaching in module 2, still, of course, within an international context. And finally, module 3, having thought about what education is for, how we might carry out that education, is now about saying, well, how do we know if our students have understood what we've taught? So the focus of module 3 is about students understanding, but also putting that into the context of you inquiring into your own practice. So we want to leave you at the end of the course with a sense of you being an inquiring teacher, someone who's able to ask pertinent questions about what you do and to investigate your own practice. So we ask you to carry out a small-scale inquiry, small-scale piece of research into how your students understand what you've taught them. So those are the 3 modules, and each of those is assessed by, it says here, a 4,000-word assignment. But a feature of the new version of the course, which is really popular and powerful, is that you actually have some choice over the mode of assessment. So lots of people do choose to write the 4,000-word assignment, but in each of the modules, there's also a choice to do a different form of assessment. So you can do a presentation form of assessment. So you would have the same assignment aims, and you would have the same level that we judge you at, the same criteria by which we judge you, but you could choose to present it, for instance, as a presentation to camera, rather than a written piece of work. So you've got that choice in each of the modules. One of the things people often worry about coming onto a course like this is whether they'll be ready to work at this level, whether they will somehow be capable of working on these assignments because they're perhaps different from their previous study, or perhaps your previous study was a long time ago. So what I'd like to reassure you is that there's lots of structure built into this. So your tutor, you have a designated tutor through the course. So somebody like me, for example, I would have a group of students that I'm assigned to. I'm there as a support all the way through the course. So as well as what we talked about in terms of those particular events on particular days when you interact with tutors, you can contact your tutors at any time with questions, you can arrange a tutorial. And as part of that support, we also look at proposals that you write for all of your assignments. And for the first module only, we allow you to write a full draft of the assignment, submit that, get detailed feedback, and then work on that and adapt it and develop it before you submit the final version. So in lots of different ways, including some of the online materials, we work with you to provide that kind of structure towards your written work. So we mentioned this being master's level study, and at the end of the course you can use some of those credits. If you want to go further than the PGCEi award itself, you could then transfer those credits and continue with Nottingham's MA in Education, which is a really popular course studied by people all over the world. We have options to study that face-to-face, but also we have many hundreds of people who study that online around the world as well from a distance. So if you had 60 credits, for instance, from the PGCEi course, that would count to being a third of the MA in Education already achieved. And if you wanted to do one of our more specialist routes, as you can see here, educational leadership, special educational needs, and various other routes, then you would bring usually 30 of your credits in. The second point here about course structure talks about the materials. The course provides a whole wealth of materials online for you as part of the package. So you don't need to be purchasing books, for example. You don't need to have access to libraries. You have everything built into the course. So in each module, in each of the units of study, you have readings that are embedded there, which are core readings that everybody will do. You also have links to supplementary readings that you can engage with. You have multimedia material, so you have audio material, you have lots of video material as well, which is built in. And then when you choose your assignment topics and you want to go and research in a more specialist way, you do your own wider reading through the university's online library. So you have access to our online library, which includes ebooks and all of the electronic journals and other more specialist things that you may want to read. So all of that is incorporated into the materials. And the new updated versions are really great and offer you quite a varied experience. The final point on this slide, we've talked about the individual tutor support through the course, but also I mentioned at the beginning being part of a kind of family or an educational community. So even if we're not able to meet for this next cohort face-to-face, we want you to feel part of a group of educators, part of a group of international educators centred in the Middle East area. And not only have Stafford Global got this expertise in the region through being based there and through working in the region with educators for many years, but the tutors on the course, such as me, we've worked with cohorts over the years and have that understanding of education in the international setting in your particular region. And we want you to learn from each other as well. So part of this will be facilitating discussions and tutorial time with other students. So whichever educational setting you work in, perhaps it's, for example, an American curriculum school, a British curriculum school, a local government school, maybe it's an international baccalaureate school. We want you to mix in with people working in all different settings in different countries in the region. So we'll set up opportunities for you to interact and learn from each other as well. In terms of entry requirements for the PGCEi, it's a postgraduate course, as the name suggests. So the normal requirement is that you have your bachelor's degree. But if you have extensive other qualifications within the educational field that you feel may stand in place of that bachelor's degree, then we can look at individual cases on a case-by-case basis. So normally we will be looking at people with that bachelor's degree, but do talk to your Stafford consultants if you feel that you have not a bachelor's degree, but other equivalent qualifications. As the course is taught through the medium of English and is at master's level, clearly there is an English language requirement. So if English isn't your first language and your own education hasn't been in English, for example, then we have this IELTS requirement here. So you can see here the IELTS levels there. Because of current circumstances around perhaps IELTS testing centres not being open and available in the normal way, the admissions department at the university has got a slightly more flexible view at the moment, not about these levels, but about some variations on those qualifications. So Stafford consultants can help you. They have all the details of the broader range of things that are currently accepted to help you meet that English language requirement at the moment. The other thing that's really important, of course, is this is a course that's about you studying education, but I hope it's been clear from what I've said about you relating it to your practice. So all of these modules, as well as the theoretical element, require you to reflect on practice in school settings and to talk about how the theory you're reading about connects to what you do and what you've seen and what you've experienced in an educational setting. So we talk about you being an established educator. That can mean a whole variety of things. It might mean that you're an experienced teacher. It might mean that you're a very new teacher. It might mean that you have a different role in school. You might be a learning support assistant, a teaching assistant, or perhaps even some other role within school. You may even be somebody who's just entering the teaching profession, but is working as a volunteer in a school setting. Now, at the moment, one of the things to do with COVID-19, which we have to take into account and be flexible about, of course, is that schools in most countries are still closed. And even looking ahead to October, when this course begins, schools perhaps will only just be opening. We don't know exactly how that's going to be. Maybe there'll be some kind of partial opening. So what we're saying at the moment is we're saying what we mean by an established educator is that you have regular connections to an educational context. So if at the moment, for example, you are an educator, but you're educating your students online because of current circumstances, then that's okay. So we've adapted and broadened that definition a little bit. And the second point here I've already mentioned about non-standard applications. So if you think from what I've described already, there's something about your situation which is a little bit outside those parameters, then do speak to your academic consultants at Stafford and they can advise you, and then we can consider your application perhaps on a case-by-case basis. So in terms of applying, I won't read through the list here, but these are the kind of things that you're going to need in your application. Do pay attention to the personal statement in particular. Make sure you're really clear about your motivation for the course, about your educational background and your current professional context in education. But also don't underplay some of the transferable skills, because we quite often have people who are transferring and changing career, and you may well have lots of skills around time management, communication, all sorts of other relevant things. So make sure that you mention those in your application as well. And in terms of your reference, see if you can choose a referee who can talk about the kind of things that I've mentioned already that relate to this course. So your readiness or master's level study, your readiness to meet deadlines and to be a self-starter in the way you work, your educational experience and background, your communication skills, all of these things that are going to be relevant. If your referee can talk about those things, that makes for a stronger application, of course. So our next cohort will be in October this year. We have two cohorts in the Middle East each year. We have one that starts the beginning of October and one that starts in the beginning of March. So if you're looking at the next cohort, that will be in October. So you can see here the 1st of October. And every year we have a limit on the number of places we have, because we want to keep the ratio of tutor to student at a really good level. So do get your application in quite soon if you're expecting or anticipating applying for this next cohort. And you can see here that we've got those interactive workshops that I mentioned, that pair of days, about a week into the course on the 9th and the 10th of October. So that takes place over a weekend. That's when we'll be doing that first stage of input with you, providing some materials to work through, having those live sessions as well. And then we'll be having those other sessions for each of the 3 modules at dates that we'll confirm shortly, which will be in line with when you're about to submit some work and are ready for the next level of input. You can see here also the fee structure and how that might work. And that's something that you can, again, discuss with Stafford and discuss the payment schedule and all of those things with your Stafford consultants. So that's been quite a race through things there. I hope that's been useful. I hope it's answered lots of your questions already. But if you do have other things you want to ask, then please do. And I think that Helen will be helping me by collating some of those issues and summarising those questions.
Excellent. That's correct. Thank you so much, Dr. Rupert. That was very, very informative. And you're quite correct. We have got quite a few questions that have come through, and I've already started grouping them together. There's about 2 or 3 applicants who have asked the same question. Is there a program that you can register for after finishing this course to get your QTS status and teach in the UK?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a common question. And it's good that you've picked up on the fact that this isn't in itself a qualified teacher status course. The usual route, if you were specifically wanting to go and teach in the UK, would be to do what's called an assessment only route towards QTS. So the English government has an assessment only form of QTS, which means that while working in a school, you can be assessed by someone who comes in, an outside assessor, who looks at a portfolio of your work, who observes some teaching that you do, and through a sort of mentoring scheme within a school, you can be assessed usually within a term or even half a term, and you can gain the award of QTS on the job, as it were. So that's a separate program. If you looked online and just simply look through Google or any other search mechanism for assessment only QTS, you'll see broadly how that works. Usually that is something that takes place in the UK because this is a UK qualification. But there are moves afoot to try and expand this and see if there are ways of doing that actually within the region, in this case within the Middle East region. And I know Stafford are involved in looking at some of those things. I don't know if Helen has any further details at the moment, but that is something that is intended to be brought in hopefully fairly soon, so that you may be able to even work on that while staying in the region and before moving to the UK.
Okay, good. I have been an educator for the past 10 years. However, I currently am not working at a school. So my question is it compulsory to be working within an educational institution during the course?
That is definitely our preferred situation because, as mentioned, the assignments need you to refer to aspects of practice. Looking at what I said about a sort of case-by-case basis, if you have literally just finished in school and still have those connections and still have extremely recent examples to refer to, that might be something we could look at as an individual basis. But apart from that, normally we would want you to have a connection to an educational setting now. And so what I would suggest to people normally is whether you could, if you don't have employment, whether you could attach yourself in a voluntary capacity to a school, and then by being associated with that school, you've got a context to draw on, and possibly you have some access to students if you wanted to, for example, do some research with some students, which is what forms part of the 3rd module when you inquire into your own practice.
Well, a very popular question is, once I receive my degree from Nottingham, will it actually mention a distance learning on it? And second part of my question is this particular program identical to a student that would be doing it at the campus?
So take the first question first of all. The award that you get, your certificate, is not going to state online or distance learning. So that's a fairly straightforward one. In terms of, is this identical to somebody doing it at the campus? This is a course that is designed specifically for the international environment and for international educators. So this is not the same as a PGCE course, which students might study face-to-face in the UK, for example. That would involve a full-time program of study that would involve being sent on placements into schools, teaching practice being assessed. So a PGCE in the UK would involve all of those things and is a full-time programme of study. The PGCEi course is covering the same ground in terms of theory and themes and so on, but this is a part-time mode of study, so you can do this alongside your work, and it's specifically looking at the international education context. So in that sense, it's a different course. And the other difference, of course, is that the PGCE, which would take place in the UK, would lead to that qualified teacher status, because the students there will have had assessed teaching practice placements, whereas our course does not involve any assessment of your actual teaching.
Okay, you talk about virtual workshops, but are there any other virtual classes that I would need to attend during the week?
No, on a sort of week by week basis, you would proceed through the units of study within each module at your own pace and according to your own working pattern. So there wouldn't be any direct commitment each week. So if you are working, or if you've got other commitments, family commitments, for instance, then you can fit this in around those things. So the only times when you would need to be ready to interact live and at a scheduled time would be on those initial 2 days, which in this case would be the 9th and 10th of October, and then on 3 other days at particular points in the module. So those would be days which would be on a weekend and would be a particular time. And for part of those days, there would be some live element to engage with. But the rest of the time, you have complete flexibility and you're working through things in your own way.
Okay, and I can see there's quite a few questions with regards to IELTS and whether students required to do that. And as Dr. Rupert has said, it's imperative that you actually send us your degree certificates or transcripts and just have a chat to your professional academic consultant who will be able to advise you if you do require to submit an IELTS. There are other tests available or methods of actually meeting that English requirement. So please do get in touch with us, because every single application is actually seen on its own merits. Okay. Right, I'm currently working in a nursery school, and unfortunately the nursery school teachers do not provide any e-learning. So how do you suggest that I actually try and enter this program? Is there any way that I can be accepted?
Well, because the next cohort is starting in October, first of all, I'd be optimistic that your nursery setting may be open by then. I don't know, of course, how that's going to play out. I don't think any of us do exactly, and it's going to vary from country to country. But hopefully you will be involved in some form of learning at that point. If not, perhaps there's a way that you could use that sort of voluntary angle that I've mentioned in response to a previous question. So maybe there's a school that's associated with your school, so a school where perhaps your nursery students then progress onto, and you could link up with them, and that might be the context that you refer to. But I would be optimistic that in October, by the time the course starts, and in fact the first piece of work that you submit wouldn't be until January, so we'd be talking January 2021, I'd be optimistic by then that you would have a setting and your nursery setting would be up and running in some form.
Okay, I'm currently working full-time, and I'm also putting in extra hours with preparing of e-learning classes for my grade 7s. Okay, how many hours of study do you think I should be able to dedicate to this program per week? Would I be able to manage this program and do my work?
Yeah, again, that's a very good question, and one that I'm sure lots of people will be thinking about. First of all, again, hopefully by the time the course begins in October, you may be doing less of the e-learning and you may be back to a more normal sort of working pattern. But nevertheless, even if you're working full-time without any extras, that's plenty, isn't it? And it's hard to envisage doing extra work on top of that. In terms of hours per week, we would tend to say as a guideline, you might think about around about 12 hours or so per week. So for some people, they spread out a little bit each day and have a routine where they do a bit each day. For others, for various reasons, whether it's by choice or by necessity, they may not be able to do that, but they might just take perhaps one full day at the weekend and do a really long concentrated stint at the weekend. So that's about the amount of work that you might be considering. It's reasonable to think, well, you know, does that work in practice? What I can say each year is that we always have this as being one of the big worries that people have. And every year people do cope with the workload. So there are ways of working efficiently and of working flexibly around things. And we know from lots of years and years of experience that people have managed to do this course on top of even a full-time job. I think the other thing to say at this point is perhaps also, and especially in the current circumstances, if your circumstances do change, if your working circumstances are not what you anticipate, or in fact, if anything else in life suddenly crops up and things get in the way, we do have a fairly flexible system of allowing you to interrupt your studies. So you can take what's called a voluntary interruption to study, and you could step out of the course with no penalty, no financial penalty, no grade penalty for an agreed period of time. Could be a month, could be 6 months, could be a year even. And as long as you complete the course within the registration period, which is a maximum of 3 years, you can negotiate to have an interruption to study. So if you do feel that your circumstances have changed in a way that you couldn't really have anticipated, then that is an option that you can consider.
Good, and a question that is actually quite popular is, I'm not currently teaching in a school per se, but I do have some tutoring experience. I am currently a professional educator in an educational training center where I do train on SAT, GRE and GMAT. Will I be accepted on this program?
Well, if you've got a regular position as a tutor, you're working for an organisation in that way, I would imagine that would be fine. What I would say is that most of the course materials that you work through are based on a school setting. So the examples, the readings, and so on are on the assumption that this is a course for people who are in some way working in a school or a preschool setting. But I would say that they were all things that you could make relevant to your role as a tutor. So if that's a regular role and you have this particular organisation that you're part of, I would imagine that would be something that should be okay at the admission stage.
Okay, what kind of resources and books can we cover during the school vacation as preparation for this program?
Well, there is no direct preparation that's required. I mean, if you have a place on the course and you wanted to contact somebody at the university, a tutor, so me, for example, so I would be the named contact for this particular cohort, we could recommend you 1 or 2 specific books and sources that you could look at. So we could do that on a case-by-case basis if there was some preparation that you wanted to do. However, I would say there isn't anything that you're required to do, and it's not an expectation that you begin the course in that way. Closer to the start of the course, you would have access to a pre-course website, and that in any case would start to give you guidance about some of the things to be thinking about and some of the things to be looking at. So in a sense, that's built into the preparation a bit nearer the time. But in terms of specific readings, then you could contact a tutor such as me, and we could give you perhaps some more personalised advice on that.
Okay, is it possible to complete the course in under 12 months?
Well, on this new version of the course, we don't have what we might call a fast track option. We do require you to complete the modules on schedule. What I would say though is that the course is put down as being a 12-month course because from the date of starting, October the 1st in this next cohort's case, through to when you finally are signed off and pass the course and have your sort of moment of graduation, that is 12 months. Your actual working time on the course is more like about 10 months. So if you began in October 2020, you would expect to be completing your work in about July, and that work would be marked through the end of July, perhaps into August. So your working time is much more over about 10 months. But in terms of can you graduate sooner, in the current model of the course, you do have to stick to the dates. So you would formally receive your graduation in October. If you wanted to come to a graduation ceremony and were able to travel to the UK, then those graduation ceremonies always happen a couple of months later in December. Most people understandably aren't able to come, and we always welcome you if you can, and it's great to see you. But if you're not able to come, you receive your certificate in around October, so 1 year after beginning.
Okay, and can you provide us more information about the marking criteria?
So the assignments, whether you choose the written option or whether you choose a verbal presentation mode, they're marked against the same criteria. And these are the criteria that are used for all of our master's level courses. So if you wanted to continue afterwards, as I've mentioned, and work on the MA in education, you'd find things map across directly. So your work would be marked on exactly the same criteria. And we share those criteria with you, so nothing is kept hidden. So from the very start of the course, we'll share with you a sort of grid that outlines the 4 main areas that we look at, the 4 main criteria, and how they are seen at different levels of achievement. So we have, without going into too much detail now, we have 4 main things that we look at. One of them is to do with organisation and structure. One of them is to do with knowledge and understanding. One of them is to do with application to practice. And one of them is to do with presentation, including referencing and academic clarity and tone and so on. So against those 4 broad areas, we break down the criteria into lots of detail for you. And we show how they might be achieved at the 3 main levels of a pass. So we have people who come out of the course at pass level, at merit level, and at distinction level. So we give you all of that information so you can see how our 4 assessment criteria are represented at those different levels of outcome.
Okay, I have managed to find a volunteering position in a school. So in your opinion, how many days a week should I be attending this volunteering in order to qualify for the program?
There's no fixed number of days that you need to attend, and it may be that you don't need to attend every week at all. It's more about having regular contact so that you feel you're part of that educational setting, and perhaps you're attached to a particular class or a particular subject, and you get to know those students. And at certain times of the course, there will be a very obvious need to be in that school or that setting. So there may be an assignment that requires you to reflect on some education that you've either carried out or that you've seen. In the final module, you may be required to collect some data from some students. So for example, observing them or interviewing them. So there's those specific moments, but at other times it's just about having that regular contact. So to reiterate what I said before, you're not going to be assessed in terms of your actual teaching. Nobody is going to be assessing your performance as an educator. So it's more about just having that connection. So there is no set number of days.
Good, and I can see that maybe some of you have joined us a little bit later, and regarding any English requirements to get into the program, please do get in touch with the consultants at Stafford, and we'll be able to advise you on how you can meet those English requirements. There are various methods. Yes, there's TOEFL, there's also IELTS, but there also are other methods that we can use now in this environment. Can you actually confirm that this is a UK level 7 qualification, and I could then progress with other universities and do a further program?
Yes, so this is master's level study, and in the UK system of different levels and the different phases of education, this is sometimes called level 7. So that is what level 7 is equivalent to master's study. So it's recognised as being master's level qualification. It is level 7 qualification. In terms of whether you carry those credits on to other universities' courses, normally that is probably fine. But of course, that depends on other universities' entry requirements. So I can't make any guarantees, of course. But most universities would have what they would call in some form something like accreditation of prior learning, and that means that they would take into account credits that come from elsewhere, from other courses, and they would regard those as equivalent. So that will depend on the particular university you go to. If you choose to carry on with Nottingham, it's very straightforward, and it's a fairly seamless progression onto RMA. But for other universities, certainly you have that level of qualification, and it will depend on their own entry requirements.
Good, and I'll just answer one or two questions with regards to local placements. Unfortunately, Stafford does not assist in placements in the UAE. And we also do not assist with the attestation process either. It is very important that students actually manage the attestation process on their own. That also brings me to another point with regards to local acceptance or local accreditation, which I can see one or two questions relating to that. It's very important that you go and speak to your own ministries, your own education ministries in your own countries within the Middle East. And the reason for this is that every single country has got its own rules and regulations pertaining to what is required to teach in that country. So please do make sure that you speak to the right authorities, and that this program is exactly what you would need for your personal as well as your professional needs. Okay. And a question from Mustafa, which I will answer. Mustafa is actually in the pharmaceutical industry at the moment, but he was a teacher for about 2 or 3 years and wants to know if he can actually enter the program. But Mustafa, as Dr. Rupert has said, it is imperative that you do try and have access to a classroom setting or an educational setting. So please do get in touch with your academic consultant, and we'll be able to guide you as to what you would require to do in order to gain entry into this program. Okay. All right. Well, I seem to have actually put all the questions together. They're all very, very similar, as I said. So it was wonderful having all of you with us this evening. Very good questions. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Rupert. It was wonderful having you with us again. Very important that I do mention, as Dr. Rupert has said, we are currently open for applications, and we only take 100 students within the Middle East for this program. So I really do encourage you to try and send your application documents to your academic consultant as soon as possible, because this program does actually book up quite fast. So do get in touch with us and let us get that very important unconditional offer for you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Helen, and thanks everybody who's attended the webinar tonight. Obviously, I can't see you, but I hope this has been useful, and I hope that we can meet in future, and good luck with your application.
Hey, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.